What went wrong for the Heat? With Game 6 just hours away, we break down if Jimmy Butler can get back to dominating versus the Knicks. If Jalen Brunson, 3, 2, 1. What went wrong for the Heat? With Game 6 just hours away, we break down if Jimmy Butler can get back to dominating versus the Knicks. If Jalen Brunson can be stopped, and if Game 6 is a must-win for the Heat. It's 5 burning questions on today's playoff edition of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. However you might be tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. 5 burning questions for you today. We'll talk about how the Heat can slow down Jalen Brunson and ask if Friday night's Game 6 is a must-win. But let's start with this sound from Jimmy Butler after Wednesday's Game 5 loss.
I'm never surprised with anything come playoff basketball time. Your best is needed all 48 minutes, if more. If you're going into overtime, you know, if Spo tells me to play 48 minutes, I will be suited and booted and ready to do that, and we'll win.
He's on fire!
Does Jimmy Butler have to play 48 minutes? This is the first of our 5 burning questions. David, are you prepared for him to be suited and booted for all 48?
I like suited and booted, but no, definitely not for 48 minutes.
And hopefully not in a boot. Hopefully that ankle's okay.
That's I think boots maybe.
I understand the reference, but yes.
Oh, okay. Right. So not a literal boot though. As far as whether or not he has to play 48 minutes, I think there was a sign of desperation that paid off for New York. What else do they have? You know, with Emmanuel quickly hurt, with Josh Hart in foul trouble. That's why Quentin Grimes and Jalen Brunson wound up playing for as long as they did, not to mention the fact that both of them were effective in their own respective roles. For Jimmy to play 48 minutes would indicate that Miami has not necessarily a need, because there is a need for Jimmy to play well, but not necessarily for 48 minutes because they're in a desperate position where they're down by a significant amount late in the game. And the only way for them to claw their way back, if they have any kind of momentum whatsoever, is for Jimmy to put on his cape and dominate yet again, as we've seen throughout the playoffs against the Bucks, in the play-in tournament versus the Chicago Bulls, etc. Hopefully that won't be the case. I think if for Miami, the plan is to be more effective, to shoot better, to be able to get to their opportunities and take advantage of 50-50 loose balls the way we talked about following the Game 5 loss. And not necessarily to over-rely on Jimmy Butler. More importantly, I think, if you wind up playing Jimmy Butler again, and the only requirement for that would be because they're in a desperate situation down by a significant amount late in the game, now you're talking about playing him for a full 48 minutes, putting extra pressure on him with the potential of going into a New York Knicks Madison Square Garden Game 7. And if you're somehow able to win that, then you're going on again to go to the Eastern Conference Finals. You cannot put that pressure on Jimmy Butler. Like, I mean, look, I know that they're going to try it if they have to. I don't think it's necessary. I think Miami has enough. They had enough yesterday. Jimmy wasn't required to play 40 minutes. He played 43. A lot more than I thought that he probably could have, based on how lackluster
he played all 12 fourth quarter minutes because the game was sort of hanging in the balance, and that was, I think that's probably the game plan going into Game 6. I don't think that Spo needs to draw it up the way that Tibbs did with Jalen Brunson. Say, hey, you're going to go all 48. Are you ready to go for that?
Yeah, they didn't have much alternative, right? I mean, like I said, what else? What other choices they have on that?
That was it. That was like a Game 7 adjustment, right? And you and I talked about, like, I don't really know what the Knicks can do differently going into Game 5. Then maybe they can experiment with some small ball line, but there wasn't like an obvious thing there. And other than, I guess, just playing your best guys the entire game, kind of what you're talking about with the wear and tear that you're risking with Jimmy Butler going forward, like, I don't know, like, what, Jalen Brunson's going to play 48 minutes again in Game 6? Right. Like, probably, right? They're still on the brink of elimination. It's still their season on the line. And then what? The Knicks win that game and he plays 48 minutes in Game 7? Like, that just seems to me like that's not sustainable. And Quentin Grimes, that wasn't the plan. It was because Josh Hart got into foul trouble early on, but still, like, Josh Hart, you couldn't throw him out there for a few more minutes. You couldn't go to somebody off of your bench because Tibbs he's completely ruled out playing guys like Derrick Rose or anybody like that off the bench. McBride, nobody like that. So this feels like the last resort for the New York Knicks. And for the Miami Heat, I don't think they need to go to that point. If this is Game 7 in Madison Square Garden, then maybe we have that conversation about full suited and booted for 48 minutes. But right now, I think it's going to be plan just like you did. And if you need to play all 12 minutes in the fourth, then you do it. You try to win this game because I don't think you want to go to Madison Square Garden for Game 7. But the other part of this, too, is the reason why the Knicks had to do the Jalen Brunson thing was because their bench had been so bad. Right. The Heat are still winning the non-Jimmy Butler minutes. The one thing I will say is probably eliminate that stretch in the beginning of that second quarter. There was like 3 minutes where it's not Jimmy or Bam on the court. It's been a positive the previous 2 games. I think you got to put Bam out there to start the second quarter, make sure one of them is always on the court. But I don't know that you got to go full 48 with Jimmy.
And I will say, I think also Jimmy wanted playing for as much as they did. One, because, again, they were in a double-digit deficit. But also with Duncan Robinson out there, whose defense was not bad. Like, I know that Duncan's been criticized for his defense, and rightfully so, but I don't think it was as porous as it was.
He did a good job of kicking him out of switches and stuff like that, and he was good at the top of the zone when they went to it.
So I think he was also feeling it. He was hot. He was a main source of their offense and part of their comeback during that second half when they were shooting so well. And we didn't see a lot of Max Strus in that period because, well, Duncan was out there. But if you've got Duncan out there, you're going to, give up something defensively. And I texted you during the game. I thought, well, you're going to have to put Bam or Jimmy out there, leave them out there while Duncan's out there until one of them comes out, because you can't go to that reserve unit that we've seen, which was pretty effective in games 3 and 4 here in Miami. But we can't afford to do that using your 2 best defenders and having them all be on the bench, especially with Gabe Vincent struggling offensively as well.
Mm-hmm. Jalen Brunson, we talked about him, his 48 minutes, 48 minutes, a masterpiece, 38 points on 22 shots. He had 7 assists, 9 rebounds, and a near triple-double. Got to the line, 10 of 12 from the free throw line. It brings us to our next burning question. David, how can the Heat slow down Jalen Brunson?
He's on fire!
That's a little too accurate there, him being on fire. I don't think they can slow down Jalen Brunson. I really don't. I think, if anything, they should lean into just letting him get his. Maybe it's not exactly a tried and true strategy, but I think the concern is everybody else. Like, you have to be able to win on the margins. You have to be able to limit Randall, his touches. You have to be able to keep Barrett, who also had a pretty solid game overall. I don't think that there's a strategy for Brunson. And I don't think we can't see Jimmy back on Brunson the way it was earlier in the series. But I also don't think you can afford to continue to tax Gabe Vincent. Like, part of why his offense has been falling off, I think, is because he's picking up Brunson full court, and that's taxing him, especially due to the physical nature of Brunson. So, from my perspective, I don't know if you pick him up full court. I don't know that you can just defend him as closely as you have. I think you can pick him up at half court and let him, it hasn't slowed him down. How about that? Going full court hasn't made enough of a difference, at least not in Game 5. So I don't know that you necessarily want to continue going to that.
I didn't notice anything. The whole purpose of picking up somebody full court is to take them out of the rhythm, get them out of their comfort zone. And Jalen Brunson was fine with it. He was like, he just got Gabe on his hip, 40 feet away from the basket. And he was like, all right, you want to just ride me for 40 feet? Ride me for 40 feet. I'm fine with it.
Let's hang out. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's hop on the bus, baby. So it was like, I don't know that I would go so far as to say just let him get his. But I also wouldn't overreact to the big game that he did have. You do want to keep Gabe Vincent out of foul trouble so he could be a little bit more aggressive. He ended up with 4 fouls in that game. I think 3 or maybe all 4 of them were in the first half. Certainly 3 of them were in the first half. You can't let him get in foul trouble. Maybe knock off the full court thing, or maybe, throw it in a little bit more, kind of sprinkle it in. Don't kind of frost the whole cake with it. But I do think that they need to figure a different way out to get Jalen Brunson out of his comfort zone. I have liked Jimmy Butler on RJ Barrett, kind of having that step in that 1 foot in the paint. There was a big play in that game where Jalen Brunson blew by Gabe Vincent, and then Jimmy came from the weak side and blocked Jalen's shot at the basket. That was really the only time I saw that new thing work. And I think part of it has been the Knicks moving RJ Barrett to the other side of the floor than where Jalen Brunson is, so that, Jimmy Butler has to take that much more, to make up that much more space in order to get to Jalen Brunson. So that's been a good adjustment by the Knicks. But I think that overall strategy will still work. I would like to see them double team him. They barely double teamed them at all in the last game. Part of that is because they had to go to zone late with so many guys in foul trouble. where you're not really double teaming out of a zone, right? You can kind of blitz and show a little bit, but even that was very conservative from them because they were so concerned about Jalen getting downhill. So what I would try to mix in some more double teams, right? Just maybe I get that you don't want to play off of Quentin Grimes the same way that you would play off of Josh Hart. Grimes went 2 of 6 from 3-point range the other night, but I would do it anyway. And if Quentin Grimes makes 8 3-pointers, let him make 8 3-pointers. I'm kind of daring him to make those shots.
I don't know about all that either. I mean, he seems like their most dangerous shooter. I mean, aside from Brunson, really, he's been the only one who's been somewhat effective, at least from 3-point range. He just hasn't.
Or play off of somebody else, play off of Barrett, play off of somebody. But I would be aggressive in throwing in some double.
What about Caleb Martin?
Brunson? Yeah, I mean, Caleb Martin coming off the bench, they use him quite a bit. His minutes were better on Jalen in Game 5 than I thought Gabe's were. The shooting percentages bear that out. Some of that is just small sample size theater, but that length of Caleb Martin does seem to bother Jalen Brunson a little bit.
A little more physical. I mean, it's just a mismatch. Brunson and Gabe both undersized. But okay,
let's keep having this conversation. We'll also talk if the Heat should not overreact to Game 5 as they prepare for Game 6. That's coming up in the next segment. David, tell listeners about our sponsor.
Well, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay's guaranteed fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit right, or you get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. And when you shop on eBay Motors with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. So get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices by going to ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only, and exclusions do apply.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every day we'll be at the arena for Friday night's Game 6. We'll have a recap after the game. Let's keep talking about what we were talking about. Jalen Brunson, how we slow them, how the Heat try to go about slowing him down. Do you like the double team idea?
Yeah, I mean, daring somebody else and knock them out is probably more effective than letting the one player who's been the most consistent on the New York side of things continue to have their opportunities. If you're going to be giving up those points, you probably want somebody else like Grimes or Barrett or Hart, especially, to be shooting the ball there, because I think it's more advantageous. The percentages are better and more in Miami's favor. So I think that certainly works. You just have to be careful with it. Look, we saw the pressure getting to Brunson in games 3 and 4 when they would double him on occasion. He would force the ball, a bad pass, a turnover, etc. I guess they just kind of went away from that in Game 5. Yeah,
I watched it all this morning. Like, we've seen the Heat do this with Trae Young in the past. We saw them, to your point, do it against Jalen Brunson even in this series. Just get to more of that. It doesn't have to be full on double team from half court. It's when Jalen Brunson loves to use these ball screens, and he's so good. He's like a pitcher, right? Where he's like, all right, I'm going to change up here, curveball here, fastball here. It's like, Jalen Brunson, I'm going to reject the screen. I'm going to use the screen. I'm going to force you to go over. I'm going to hesitate. I'm going to fake it this way. He is so good at keeping you guessing as a defender. He's so shifty that when you trap him coming off of those ball screens, it just eliminates some of his options, right? And I just didn't see any of that in Game 5, and I thought he was able to get comfortable and get to his shots, whether it was getting to the basket or even getting those step back 3-pointers that he likes to get to. When you have somebody hedging on those pick and rolls or even being more aggressive in trapping, it kind of takes away the ability to get to those step back threes. But in terms of the overall game plan, how much of the Heat's game plan did you like in Game 5? Was this just a matter of them missing shots? Are there some big changes that you would like to see? In other words, David, should the Heat be careful not to overreact to Game 5? That's our next burning question.
He's on fire!
I don't see a need for an overreaction. Even as we were talking about it yesterday, when the minutes of the game actually ending, it seemed pretty apparent that Miami had a very good chance of being able to steal Game 5 in New York and close out the series. It's just some things didn't work out their way. And those are the things that you can't control, nor can you plan. You put yourself, planning puts you in a position to succeed. And Miami was in that position. They just couldn't get it done because of things that you can't account for, like the lack of shooting, again, regressing to the mean as they have throughout this series against the Knicks, unfortunately. And of course, the loose balls and things of that sort. Like, you can't put yourself in a position. I think the rebounding perhaps could have been a little bit more active, but again, you have to give credit to New York for altering their game plan because they were in a position of desperation where they needed to win yesterday's game, and they played with just enough more intensity to be able to outreach Miami and get past them into those situations to put themselves to capitalize on those opportunities when they came about. So I don't know that there's a change to the game plan that would be very effective or more effective than what we saw in games 3, 4, and 5. Like, I think the strategy is there. The shots were open. The opportunities were there. Miami just couldn't capitalize. And I think it's as simple as that.
If they missed even a few, or if they made a few more of the open threes that they missed, we're having a completely different podcast right now. We're looking ahead to tonight's game against Philly and Boston and wondering which team would be the better matchup and all that kind of stuff. So I don't want to overreact to this either, because this could have been a very different show if they just miss, or if they just make a few more of those threes that they missed. I do think, though, that they need to focus on narrowing the rebound margin. It was a 50-34 margin in game 5. That can't be like that again. And the fast break points. The Knicks outscored the Heat fast break points 16-9. The Heat have been missing open shots all series, right? So this is not new, right? Actually, it's exactly what they've been shooting. They shot 30% last night. They're at 31% for the series. So they've been able to win these games by winning those other things on the margins like you were talking about. I think that they need to make a concerted effort to get back on the break, get those fast break points up a little bit, finding those easy baskets and transition off of Kevin Love outlet passes. That's a way to get Jimmy Butler away from Quentin Grimes and get him more opportunities to score. Like, that to me would be the key.
Kevin Love is an interesting name there, because I think the shooting was particularly egregious yesterday, and he does
6 for 28 on the series from 3-point range.
0 for 7 in game 5 alone, and a lot of those at key moments there where either the Knicks were starting to build their lead or just expand it, and then continue to get the kind of momentum like we saw in the transition between the third and fourth quarter. They were really good. The first and second quarter also, like, that's where they just wind up pushing ahead after Miami had established a 10-point lead in that first quarter, 24-14. It looked like the Knicks were done, and then all of a sudden things just fell apart. And I think part of that was the inability to make shots. You can't just look at Love alone, and Gabe struggled. Everybody struggled from 3 with the exception of Max Strus and Duncan Robinson, who went 9 of 20, a combined 9 of 20. So I just wonder whether or not Spo needs a quicker hook. And I don't know that there's another option out there. Haywood Highsmith was part of that unfortunate Knicks run as well. His defense was a spark in Miami. In New York, it was a problem. He wasn't really doing much offensively, obviously, but even defensively, he wasn't much of a factor.
I think the Haywood Highsmith, like those 2.5 minutes to start the second quarter, I think those are probably gone. I think Spo maybe goes to an 8-man rotation. A 9-man rotation with Lowry, Caleb, Zeller, and Duncan off the bench. And it's probably a little bit overdue. I understand that second unit at the start of the second quarters have been a positives in the previous 2 games before game 5, but Highsmith hasn't done anything. I like Haywood Highsmith. He was a placeholder in those second units during those runs. It was just to give Jimmy and Bam a break, and that was it.
Does Spo need a quicker hook on Kevin Love?
I mean, he only played 16 minutes. I feel like the hook has been pretty quick. He only played 16 minutes in the last game. The thing with Kevin Love is you need him out there for a body to put on Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein. And though Robinson had his first good game of the series, it was also his first good game of the series. I would expect Kevin Love at home to bounce back a little bit more. You can't really start Caleb Martin because of the size issue. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to put Bam on. Right. If you put Bam on the other center, then that leaves maybe Jimmy Butler on Julius Randle, and now you're not getting that hedging that you liked. And maybe that's what you try to do, but I don't think Caleb Martin was lighting it up either enough to the point where you want to start him. I like what the Heat have done. I would not overreact. I would stick with the same starting 5. I think it's worked. And I think Kevin Love is important. It wasn't his best game on Wednesday night, but those outlet passes, those little in-between things, the rebounding, like when we talk about how the Heat are going to narrow the rebounding edge and create more fast break opportunities,
best rebounder,
it kind of starts with Kevin Love, right? So I think he's going to be important if the Heat are going to go ahead and win game 6.
I agree.
Anything else here in terms of overreactions? Or should we
no overreactions from like the Heat fan base and the team in general. I think they've been pretty measured. I think it was an unfortunate loss, and I think the team understands what's at stake. They let one slip away. They would have rather locked it up on Wednesday night. Unfortunate for them that they weren't able to do so. So I think it's been pretty balanced overall as far as
I think their game plan has been the better one. I still think that the Heat are the better team. But It's a playoff series. Anything can happen. Small sample sizes can go either way. With that said, is Friday's game 6 a must win? Plus, should we trust the corgi? That's next on Locked On Heat. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Everydayers will be at the arena for Friday night's game 6, and we're going to have a recap after the game. You can reach Locked On Heat on Twitter, Instagram, email us, lockedonheat@gmail.com. Game 6 is at home in Miami. Game 7 would be in New York if it gets to that point. With that said, David, is Game 6 a must-win for the Miami Heat?
No, it isn't. I waffle between this because, like, part of me, the vibe check is that Miami should be able to close it out at home. This is your best opportunity. You're going to have the crowd behind you, despite all the MSG South nonsense and everything else. I think, we've seen this team play so much more effectively. I don't think that they necessarily get a home friendly whistle or anything like that, but I think part of the momentum, some of those plays that you can build off of, the foundation for what could be a good game or a good win, come more easily at home. And I think you feel that energy because the home crowd has been fantastic. They've drowned out the Knicks noise, however small it might be. And they have cheered on their team. And we've seen it. Like games 3 and 4 against Milwaukee and New York were electric environments in that home arena. And I think you hustle a little bit more. You get Bam, collecting those rebounds. You have that possession they had in game 4 where it was offensive rebound after offensive rebound. They didn't have that energy in game 5. And a lot of that due credit where it is to the New York Knicks and their overall physicality and taking Miami out of what their comfort zone had been. But I think you'll be able to reclaim some of that energy in Miami. Having said all that, I think Miami has been in good positions to win both games 2 and game 5. In game 2 without Jimmy Butler, with the exception of the 5-minute stretch late in that quarter where some questionable officiating may or may not have been a factor, like Miami has been able to win in New York. I don't think New York has not clearly been able to show the ability to win in Miami. So if it goes down to a game 7, I know Knicks fans will be encouraged. Knicks in 7, that's the way it was supposed to be, etc. They were all questioning the nature of their existence. Yeah. Following game 5, but now game 4, excuse me, now that we got another win there, I think they're a little bit more encouraged by it. But I think Miami has shown that they can win on the road, something the Knicks have not been able to do against the Heat. Against the Cavs, certainly, but not against the Heat.
It's not a must win because game 7 is a must win, if we're going to be literal about it. But I think that this is as close to a must win as it gets without being a must win because I'm not overreacting. You and I are not overreacting to game 5. I think the Heat are the better team in this series, and I expect them to win this series. And I do expect them to win Friday night. I do. I also expected them to win Wednesday night at Madison Square Garden, and they didn't. So what do I know? But if the Knicks were to come into Miami and win that game, now we're talking about real momentum. Now we're talking about real overreactions. Now we're talking about real worry for the Heat having to go to New York and get that game at Madison Square Garden. And you're right. The fans are going to be more up for it. The Knicks are going to be more up for it. They're going to have all the momentum. Like, you do not want to go. And I'm not going to say this is a must win, but I would say that I would approach this as if it were a game 7 if I were the Miami Heat. You do not want to have to pack your bags and go back to New York. You want to avoid that at all costs. So if you and I don't think that Jimmy Butler needs to play 48 minutes, but if Spo does, play him 48 minutes. Like, treat this as if it were a game 7. You cannot worry about, okay, our guy's going to be tired for a game 7 potentially. If you can't worry about any of that, go out there, win this game. You just don't want to risk it. One game, anything can happen.
The counter to that for me is the question, the X factor of Jimmy's overall health, because he did not look 100%. And I know that he downplayed it and he was limping before the game. We questioned whether or not that was true. And then he wound up having that lackluster performance. So you have to wonder whether or not it's much more of a factor than even he'd like to publicly admit. And having said that, if they lose game 6 by any chance, I think a big part of that reasoning behind it would be that Jimmy wasn't able to step up the way he has throughout the postseason. And if that's the case, then there are lingering issues there with that injury. And I don't know that you want to go and put him into that environment in game 7 and count on being able to win if he's not at 100% or far below whatever he's supposed to be at. So I don't know. There are concerns there.
Isn't that an argument then to play him the 48 minutes? Just go all the way out. That way you create as much rest between this series and the next series as possible. Yes, I would rather him play an extra 3 or 4 minutes in game 6 than another 42 minutes in Game 7.
That's fair. The hope, the ideal for Miami is that, they blow them out in the first half, are up 20 in the third quarter, and then Jimmy doesn't have to play at all. But that just hasn't been the case with these Knicks teams. Both teams have been very, very evenly matched all season long, during the regular season, during the postseason.
My guess is he still gets the 2-minute break at the start of the second quarter, the 2 or 3 minute break, and he probably plays something like 44 or 45 minutes if this thing is close down the stretch. But besides the Jimmy Butler point, if I'm the Miami, I'm acting like this is Game 7. I'm whatever extra stuff that Spo is hanging on, the hack of Mitchell Robinson kind of little quirks and things that he's throwing into these. Like, whatever you got, it's a kitchen sink game to me. It is. Like, whatever else you have that can help you. You're not holding on to anything. You are trying to avoid going to New York as much as possible.
What else is there? Like, what else?
I don't know. I didn't think they were going to go hack a Mitchell Robinson. I don't know if our listeners ever got to it, but like, I don't remember him ever going to hack a Robinson like we were talking about. Like,
somebody else
knows what Spo's going to come up with. All I'm saying is, like, whatever he's got, if you think you have to use it, just use it. Don't hang on to any cool sideline out of bounds plays that you've been scheming up. Like, nothing. Just go for it. Just go for it. Empty the clip on this one. Final question here, David.
He's on fire.
Do you believe in the corgi? For those who haven't seen it, there's a corgi that has gone viral on social media for correctly guessing a playoff series in these playoffs. He bounces a ball off of a staircase. It drops into one of two buckets that represent each team. So far, the corgi has gotten every game right in this Heat Knicks series. He also has the Heat winning Game 6 to close it out. David, do you believe in the corgi?
100%. We've seen this throughout human history, animal and human history. The partnership there when it comes to large sporting events is undeniable. Otto the Octopus, the late great Otto the Octopus, accurately predicting.
He died?
Yes, I think so. The World Cup, I think he that was his last prediction, and it was right.
Went out on top.
Of course. Yeah, well, that's the way you do it. I mean, I don't know if the corgi obviously doesn't have that kind of longevity, unfortunately, but at least for the next
corgis, it's like their hips or something.
It's not every 4 years. Well, I mean, they're just small little mutants of a dog. They don't really count. But as far as
wow, shots fired at corgi. What was it that drive by on corgis? People love corgis.
Yeah. Because people are stupid, and loving a corgi is ridiculous.
Wow, what happened? This is spiraling out of control, David. You believe in the corgi, the stupid corgi?
Yeah, I do believe in the corgi. Yeah,
okay,
I do.
All right.
I do. I'll wrap it up there.
I love the corgi. I'm all for this kind of stuff. I'm going to be really disappointed when it turns out that this is an AI corgi.
No,
and it's just we've all been like this is some sort of deep fake thing.
Is it a Heat fan who posted this in the first place?
I don't know who posted it. I just keep seeing it. Like it's doing the Lakers Warriors series. I think it's got those games right too, unless I missed whatever happened with the prediction in last night's game. So this corgi is just on top of it. Like just fire everybody that works for TNT, ESPN that's doing predictions and hire a corgi.
That's
I would be okay with a corgi in a suit. I'm pro corgi. I don't know why you're so anti corgi. I don't know what happened.
I'm not. I just
okay.
It's a little hot.
Stirring it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't have New York corgi lovers coming at me in my mentions or anything like that.
I hope the corgi's right for Friday. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Everydayers, we'll be back tomorrow night from the arena with a recap of Game 6. In the meantime, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on your podcast app. David, thanks for joining me.
You got it, Wes.